So Dr. Kamana Beamer is a professor at the Center for Hawaiian Studies in the Hui ʻāina Momona program at Manoa, with a joint appointment in the Richardson School of Law and the Hawaii Nui Akea School of Hawaiian Knowledge. He was previously the president and CEO of the Kohala Center. And his research is on governance, land tenure, Hawaiian resource management, and he has worked prior as a director of Āina-based education at Kamehameha schools. He's also a graduate. It's really a privilege to introduce my friend, Kamana, Dr. Beamer. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, and I will be sharing your PowerPoint in just 1 second.
Awesome. Mahalo. Aloha mai kako. Hope everybody's doing as good as can with COVID and everything that we're involved in. Really honored and humbled to have a chance to kind of talk story with you folks here a little bit about some of my work and Manoa. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So I'm going to talk story a bit on ʻŌiwi agency, Aloha ʻāina, and circular economy. So really humbled and honored to be here. And we're going to go ahead and get started. Have some time at the end to sort of ask questions and talk story. So let's jump right in. Next slide, please. Okay. I'm going to start share a little mele from my tutu, my grandmother, Winona Kapua Ilohia Manono Kalani Beamer. And this is an image from a special place from our ohana, a place, Kumohunua, here on Hawaii Island in Kona, where a tremendous event took place, the Battle of Kumohunua, this courageous story of Kamakakūokalani, Monono, and others, this phrase of Malama ko aloha. But I'm going to start with this, and this is a mele that my tutu just kind of a chant that she put to music and used to help me fall asleep. But it's a story about these beautiful tree shells, tree snails that live in the forest and their relationship, to the akolea fern and their ability to kind of fetch water. The way that my tutu told the story was about the cattle were introduced and they're trampling over the forest. And so these little tree snails, are crying one night and they're going, I cannot get the water because we're getting trampled on. We can't get down the forest canopy to collect from the akolea and get into other trees. And the way she said was, she had these magical stories for youth and kids. And it's going to be relevant when we think about agency and the future of our people. But that was her method for engaging youth was, to tell these mo'olelo. And so this kolea bird hears the kahuli crying in the night and sets out a deal. And the kolea says, hey, I'll go ki'i the water for you if you'll sing me this beautiful song. And so, yeah. Kahuli aku, kahuli mai, kahuli le'ula lea kolea, kolea kolea ki'i ka wai, wai a kolea, wai a kolea. Kahuli aku, kahuli mai, kahuli le'ula lea kolea, kolea kolea ki'i ka wai, wai a kolea, wai a kolea. So I sing that song to kind of bring my tutu into this virtual space, this crazy, I was going to say Zoom world, but this is the Teams world, I guess, new to me. And I want to start with saying, this is a conference on education, and so all of your efforts, to educate our youth, our keiki, from their earliest ages of, pre-K, infancy programs, all the way up to PhDs, are so important and can have such a profound impact. I sing that simple song even today, at 43, and I use it to introduce some of the ways in which, to me, we can be open to the breadth of our ike, and so a lot of my talk here is going to be more analytical and reframing how we see ourselves and our people. But I want us to be open to the breadth of the work and the ways in which we engage and teach. And so that little Hapahaole kid way back then, somehow that's me today, but that relationship that I had with my tutu is something that continues to ground and enrich and allow me to try to kamau and holomua in these times. So let's jump to the next slide. So when we think about this idea of agency, you folks as educators, I cannot stress how important it is, to consider the optics in which you tell our history to our youth, to consider, the ways that you frame the stories of our people and our ancestors. And so, here's a example that I sometimes use. If we think about one way of telling the story of our people is, through this optic of colonialism, where, how did we get from this halepili to this haleali'i? Okay. And, we could see it as kind of like, hey, our ancestors went haole, right? Tried to explain like, and I'm gonna, suggest, this binary from traditional to modern, is something that we want to interrogate and analyze, because I'm not sure if it's really relevant. So if we can jump to the next slide. Oh, sorry, one more click. Yeah. So rather than seeing this, I'm sorry, Sid, one back. There we go. Rather than seeing this same story through the gaze of, colonialism, or the optic of colonialism, how do we see it through the eyes or the gaze of our ali'i, the people that were in the midst of navigating and negotiating this time period, for instance? So now we can jump to the next one. So if we look at this through the ʻŌiwi optics, through the eyes of, our ali'i and their framing, from halepili to haleali'i, let's get deep into that haleali'i, and maybe the outside might look, Victorian like, okay, and to be sort of like appear like a European structure, or in the forms of European architecture. But when we get inside the haleali'i, what did we actually see? We saw ali'i continue to use kahili, right, as traditional symbols of royalty. So within this haleali'i, you had in the throne room, you had actually kahili from the time of Umiali Loa, right, that were preserved and maintained. The interior of the koa of the Ilani Palace was all made of koa itself. So there's a lot more going on than just our people kind of ho'ohaole. And we can jump to the next slide, Sid. And so, in fact, I think that these, setting this up, right, is how did we get from this halepili to this haleali'i are false dichotomies, right? And in fact, like looking through ʻŌiwi optics, this whole thing of traditional to modern is a false binary and dichotomy. And what I mean by that is we know that, ali'i like Emma, for instance, Kapuaiwa, I mean, they're actually in the midst of interacting and getting their bodies in these structures that were European like. They also constructed halepili, right? And they live kind of in both structures. And so that's just a small example of how you can frame and tell these stories to our youth, okay, as educators. And I want to, even stepping out of these words of traditional and modern, that we use as sort of in some ways are like conceptual shackles of the English language. There is really no word, you go look in the Puke Vehe Vehe Olelo, there isn't a very clear counterpart to traditional. If you look at that in the Puke. So of course we think of kahiko, right? We think of hula kahiko, for instance, right, versus hula awana. But even that, kahiko lives, right? I mean, there's new ways of doing kahiko. It doesn't stay sort of embedded in one period in time. And actually, the closest translation to the word traditional is mai na kupuna mai. Okay, and I think we can go to the next slide, Sid. So if we think about that, mai na kupuna mai, and I talk about this more in my book, No Mako Kamana, if you want to use this more in educating. Mai na kupuna mai, how is it different than traditional? Well, it continues to grow, right? It's never ending. It doesn't mean that it's etched in time and kind of like temporally static. And this is what exists in the traditional bubble. In fact, mai na kupuna mai means that song that my grandmother just taught me, right? That becomes a tradition for my keiki, right? And that legacy continues to live on. And so these are some of the examples, if you look into our traditional society, that you can kind of see transferred in the midst of the kingdom. So we'll go through one example. Next slide, please, Sid. Oh, sorry, one more. And so, from the earliest, some of these appropriations of modernity, some of the ways that our kupuna exercise agency, we can see in the New Paper Hawaii. So as early as 1835, Ke Po'okulo publishes a mo'oku auhau from Haloa to Kauikeoli. And next slide, Sid. There we go. And here's another one, 1842, Samuel Kamakau, in Kanona Nona. This is the Kumohunua genealogy, and we'll walk through this one a little bit here. So this is begins with Kumohunua, the source of the earth, right? Source of the universe, if you will. And to Wakea, and he says that's 21 generations. And try click again. And then Wa'elua is from Haloa to Helepava, 27 generations. And we can have another click, Sid. One more click. And then we have Wa'ekolu, the third Wa of Kumohunua. And we need one more click. And this will be from Helepava to Umi. So 46 generations that are documented here. And you can click again. And Kamakau kind of describes what happens, in this period. So ho'omaupopo ia ko lako manawa i hanau ia e kekahi po'e akamai i ke ku'auhau ma ke mele. One more click. So if you cannot olel Hawaii. So we remember the time of the birth of these chiefs. The persons that were skilled in genealogies put these chiefs and their names to chant. And one more click, Sid. And then, we get to this particular version of the mo'oku auhau ends with Kamehameha, 117th generation, the fourth segment from Umi to Kamehameha. And so one more click. And got to click one more. So when Kamakau is describing why he's doing this, right, and what this means, he says, "Okia ki ku'auhau ali'i, oia na Kūpuna o na ali'i a me na kanaka o Hawaii nei." And one more. This chiefly genealogy shows the ancestors of the ali'i and the people of Hawaii. One more. O na li Oahu, a me Kauai, a me ko Hawaii, a me Maui, a me Molokai, ho'okahi no Kūpuna. Go ahead, Sid. And actually this one is on my little email because I think it's so important. Kamakau reminds us, right? Even, we all come from the same lineage, right? The ancestors of the people, the Kanaka and the chiefs are of Haloa. And in fact, as much as we joke, and I'm guilty of this, Hawaii Island is the best, Kauai is the best, we all come from the same lineage and the same place. So go one more, Sid. And so, OEV agency, like printing and asserting our agency in this modern and new framework at the time, right? So what did this printing do? It reflected a fundamental way of viewing and being OEV in the world. Go ahead, Sid. It reflected OEV perspective on the origin of place and people. It's using the printed word to express ancient ways of being. It's appropriating modernity. And one more. And it's asserting antiquity of rule and authority. And I think we might have one more little tab. And it's giving elite knowledge to the masses. So again, you could use this as a metaphor for how you approach and, how do we teach our youth today? How do they engage with technology? And the new paper could be the metaphor for whatever it is, Microsoft Teams. How do we ho'o Hawaii these things, and how do we use them in creative ways to exercise our own agency and identity? Go ahead, Sid. And here's another example. Oh, sorry, back. No problem. Here's another example of this kind of ʻŌiwi agency when I think about it. So this is a map, Hawaii from SP Kalama, 1838, and it's one of the earliest attempts at kind of attempting to be more comprehensive in documenting our Hawaiian system of palena and place and divisions. And you can just see it was actually at its time in 1838, it utilized this copper-plated technology. They were just learning to put color on maps, and it was actually very cutting edge, for its time period. This map made its way all the way to the Library of Congress in DC. There's a copy in the Royal Geography Society in London, and there's a copy at the Hawaii State Archives. So, it's a pretty powerful map that, anyone around the world in 1838, before Hawaii was recognized as an independent and sovereign state, which happens in 1843, you could look at this map, right? And it countered Cook's map and narrative that the islands were empty. Okay, it says immediately, hey, look at this. People, divisions, even if you cannot olal Hawaii, there's something going on here, and that, there is order over the Āina. Okay, go ahead, Sid. And so these, this legacy of agency, I think, builds off of Aloha Āina, right? And we can see it in the Kumohunua itself, the origins of Aloha Āina. Think about how our ancestors were able to, design. We could have designed our place divisions any way we wanted. They could have been squares and rectangles like Jefferson folks decided for much of the continental United States. But ours were different, right? And it was this, to me, this kinship, this thinking of our natural systems as Kūpuna, right? As ancestors, and the connectivity in which our people saw these systems that enabled us to design these ahupua'a that connected, natural systems from the Mauka to the Makai, from the marine to the terrestrial, and saw the circles and the cyclical nature of the interaction of these environments. So go ahead, Sid. So these ahupua'a created these really integrated and complementary human, natural and human systems. So we know the lo'i, right? They, utilize beautiful fresh water from the streams, made it more nutrient. Eventually, they made their way down and click again, Sid, to Lokoi'a, right? So again, we could have designed our food production systems any way we wanted. Sorry, I think I'm hearing some. If you guys can mute the mic, sorry. Our Kūpuna set up these systems to be integrated and complementary. And so again, it shows that kind of systemic design-based thinking, I think, of our Kūpuna and our ancestors to create systems that were integrated with natural cycles within the environment, and not just integrated, but attempted to enhance, right? So when you get down Makai, you capture this, nutrient-rich fresh water, and what do? You cultivate limu to farm herbivorous fish. Go ahead, Sid. And you guys can teach, the integrated system of the lo'i, right, and how it's related to the lokoi'a and the fish pond. But think about the agency involved, right? When our Kūpuna came, on Va'a, we didn't have all these technologies in place, so we adapted, we innovated based off of the unique ecosystem niches of place, right? And we tried to design these food systems and resource management systems to enhance the uniqueness of those ecosystems. And I'm just showing two here. We could talk about, the dryland field systems and others, but get our students kind of thinking about that. Okay, go ahead, Sid. And all the way to PhD, Natalie Kurashima in this really foundational, amazing work. Dr. Natalie Kurashima, I should say. Excuse me. She puts together this research that talks about that actual productivity of the ancestral food production system of our kupuna. So, using only 6% of the lands, right? Our kupuna produced enough food to support 86% of the population today in Hawaii. So today's agriculture uses like 4 times as much land, and it only produces about 13% of the food that we consume. And then the beauty of this is it's not a lost hope. It's not a lost cause because of where we cultivated food, in these unique, flood zones and so on and so forth. 71% of these lands used for ancestral agriculture are still, available for usage today. So what this means is our ancestral agriculture is more efficient than conventional agriculture, at least in terms of food production for our islands. So again, like with, rope made out of, vines from the forest and tools made out of stone, our kupuna produced more food than we do today and could have fed 86% of the population. Just really amazing insights that are rooted to me in Aloha Āina. Go ahead, Sid. And we know that system almost, it's still there. We can restore it, but it did almost collapse. And it didn't just collapse on its own. It was there was an intentional, overthrow of our country. There was a dismantling of our structures of governance, and a confiscation of our national lands that we still struggle with today, like Mauna Kea, for instance, where we don't have the ability to govern and to make decisions over. But here's a quote that comes from, shortly after the overthrow, in the midst of the so-called Wilcox Rebellion. Samuel M. Damon, and I found this many years ago, Sydney's familiar, he says, if we're ever to have peace and annexation, the first thing to do is to obliterate the past. So everybody here on this Microsoft Teams meeting right now, is a resilient survivor. We are miracles, that we are here today talking about the issues that we are, resurrecting ancestral knowledge and teaching it to our keiki, but not just resurrecting, we're embodying it, living it in our lives for a better future. And in fact, that was never supposed to happen. Okay, we are in a new phase of that plan, and that the overthrow had tremendous implications for the management of our natural resources all across Hawaii. So, just as an example, right? What does a lo'i system look like? What does an integrated complementary human and natural system look like? It looks like the one on the left, and we're super familiar with the one on the right, right? And think about since the 19s when the Alawai was dredged and built, right, the amount of waste and petroleum that runs off from our roads and has been literally damaging our reefs for about 100 years now. And that's an example of what happens when we lose sight of these Aloha Āina and these relationships in terms of governance of our natural resources. Okay, go ahead, Sid. So today, right now, Hawaii is incredibly food insecure. We import about 88% of our food. If you think of islands as isolated, if oceans are boundaries and not connectors, and of course we see them as connectors, but in many ways we're the most isolated islands and remote in the world. We're incredibly food insecure. Go ahead, Sid. And in the midst of all of this, we're grappling with climate change, climate crisis. It's not as if the climate's just deciding to change. It's affected by capitalism and humans' impacts on the environment. And here's Lao Tzu. I love Lao Tzu and his philosophy, still relevant for today. If you don't change direction, you may end up where you're heading. So go ahead, next slide. All around the world, our world is grappling with these issues. If we don't change direction, we'll end up where we're heading. And so we're trying to change. And so, embodying the agency of our kupuna, building off of Aloha Āina, all around the world, there's this idea about a circular economy. Okay. And it's happening, across the EU. The EU has actual action plans. They've invested, over $700 billion euros, and a part of that is towards shifting to a circular economy. And essentially, what is a circular economy? It's something that creates a regenerative economy. If you could go back one slide, Sid, I just want to go through a couple of these main points. Yep. So key aspects of the transition to a circular economy are to develop a regenerative, equitable economic system. The goal of a circular economy is to decouple environmental growth from environmental degradation. And so what we mean by that essentially is, we like jobs. We just don't want to pillage and develop every single aspect of our ʻāina to have them, right? There's better ways to have jobs. Circular economies are trying to create meaningful work while rejuvenating the environment. Trying to keep materials in the supply chain as long as possible. So how do we keep materials and resources and preserve their value? So it's not just take, make, waste, right? We don't just get our flat screen TV, throw it away, and then 2 years later we buy another. We find ways to extract the unique trace resources that are in even the flat screen TVs to keep them in productivity for as long as possible. Okay, now we can jump, Sid. One more. We went through this. So for me, when we think about Aloha ʻāina, it didn't create. Oftentimes we use this phrase subsistence economy, and I want to kind of lean in on that a little bit and just think. When we think about lo'i, we think about lokoi'a, we think about the dryland field systems. They were producing abundance, so our people weren't just subsisting. There was intentional design and organization that was involved. So our ancestral economy, to me, is much more like a circular economy. So instead of take, make, waste, right? What do we do in Aloha ʻāina economy? We give, take, rejuvenate. Those of you that are lawai'a, right? That wa'a people, we know, what do we do with ko'a? You don't just go out and take, you go out and feed, right? And you develop that relationship with ko'a, and then you gather and you take, and that creates this regenerative relationship between you and the resource, right? And I think if we can redesign some of the things that we do to be more like give, take, regenerate, we have a better, more functioning, more powerful and values aligned economy. So go ahead, Sid. If you want to follow up more, I have some articles on this. In Value of Hawaii 3, there's a little very short piece, good you can use for students. Aloha ʻāina economy, give, take, regenerate. Go ahead, Sid. And I wanted to end, sort of with this discussion a little bit on our efforts. So to me, building off of that agency of our Kūpuna, is, we can Hawaii things, our values. Aloha ʻāina can lead significant and important changes, not just in Hawaii, but all around the world. And so even in the midst of this COVID, whatever it is, I'm not sure if it's a crisis anymore. I'm not sure if it's a new reality. The times that we live in, what I'm trying to say is our ancestral values continue to be pillars of strength and foundations for our future. So some of us, about 14 of us, it's almost a year now. I think last March we started meeting, and we ended up, galvanizing and creating this ʻāina Aloha Economic Futures Initiative. So over 27,000 individuals and organizations have signed on, a whole broad swath of individuals. We have a declaration, we have a Huli action agenda. Click the next slide, Sid. We created this 4-step process to try to rethink our economy. So, we do need something better for our islands. Our keiki and our ʻāina deserve better. You and I, each of us deserve better. And the people that can't be here deserve better, because even in the midst of this crisis, probably, if we're here at a conference, we have some level of privilege. Many of my cousins aren't going to be at this conference. And so, we got to do something better, more equitable, more just for our islands. And these are some of the goals of what we're trying to do with ʻāina Aloha. So you can visit the website go check it out. But we developed this 4-step process, and now we're kind of in phase 4. But I wanted to highlight, if you want to go and look at, we galvanize community ideas for what could happen for the new economy, and develop sketches and proposals. So if you go on the next slide, Sid, you can actually go on our website, and we have embedded these videos of these workshops where we gathered community, and we facilitated conversations and proposals in a whole range of sectors. Okay. But if you want to learn more on circular economies, for instance, you can jump on this circular economy, and you can watch the embedded video. Okay, next one. And again, our effort was not like, there was no strategic plan. It literally was just in the midst of everything that was going on, and we were brainstorming and throwing out ideas, and just started to build, certainly because of the strength of my peers and their efforts. But eventually, we started to get county councils that signed resolutions in support of transitioning, embodying this Aloha ʻāina economic futures effort and transitioning to a circular economy. So, so far we have Kauai, we have Maui County Council, Hawaii County Council. I don't have the reso up here. But yeah, all the county councils other than Honolulu so far have signed on to this effort and this initiative. Go ahead and click next slide, Sid. And we're continuing to push. So, if you want to go on, if you're interested in this, you still can, sign up. We'll send you updates. Right now, we have a policy playbook that we're about to launch. And there'll be other playbooks and initiatives that we're launching. But, we're supporting specific bills that kind of align to our value system and value set. Another important tool, for those of you that are perhaps making decisions on allocating budgets, or maybe in your organization you want decision makers to make more Aloha ʻāina Aloha types of decisions, we actually developed a rubric, sort of a decision-making rubric and framework that you can utilize and score to decide what projects you want to move forward with and fund. So we're trying to create the tools to move us in the direction and with the likeness of our Kūpuna. So last one, Sid. And I think the one thing I will say, that I've witnessed I'm 43, I'm getting way more white in my beard, and pretty soon all my hair are going to be, I'm going to be ohulehule, bald or whatever. But what I've seen in my generation has been, these efforts to restore these systems of our Kūpuna, and what, incredible sites of, resilience and strength and leadership, that we can gain from our community, and that's a big part of ʻāina Aloha Economic Futures, is to try to elevate, the innovation, the brilliance that's happening, amongst our community. And that last image, is an image from Paepaeoheia, some of my idols, some of my friends. And I remember being there, I don't know how many years ago, maybe 20, when the first mangrove on the side was kind of being cleared, and helping Kalaho, with the steel chainsaw, and we had these ropes, and we're cutting through all the mangrove, trying to figure out, what's going on. And now just to see, like, almost the whole pond open, restored, kako iwi above, even above that, the action that's going on is just really incredible. And so, how do we embed and embody our values of Aloha ʻāina? How do we better position our people as real leaders and experts in this broader global conversation on circular economies and sustainability, in order to have hope for a generation? No leila, ke mau mana'o, mahalo a nui, and ready to take any questions. I think we got maybe 13 minutes.
We have 13 minutes. Thank you, Kamana. That was an awesome presentation. Started with a mele in case you missed the beginning. I'll turn it over to Mark to see if we have any questions in the chat.
Yes, mahalo. So we've got a few statements, but there's one real question that came through, and it is it possible to get a copy of these slides? So, Kamana, Mana'o.
Yeah, why don't send me an email to beamer@hawaii.edu. I think it depends on what, if it's for educating students or whatever. I think that's great. Some of this work is a little bit, we're in the middle of submitting proposals for funding and stuff like that. So it just depends on which slides. But yeah, happy to share anything on Āina Aloha economic futures. If you go on our website, all of that is, it's all free. Use anything that's there. So all of that stuff is totally free. There's no proprietary stuff. Yeah, so happy to help in that sense.
Great. And there's a lot of statements that are coming through about the circular economy, the give, take, and regenerate. So no question, but very excitement on that level.
Yeah. And there'll be more on that front. I got introduced to circular economies about maybe 6 or 7 years ago with some, I met these, they're now my colleagues, and they work out of the University of Augsburg in Germany. So we have several publications that are kind of in the midst of coming out. And to me, that there's this global conversation, and it's not that it's perfect. We still have a whole bunch of social justice issues that we have to remedy, and we have to elevate in the circular economy question. Land back, recognition of patriarchal structures. So it's not that it's perfect, but to me, there's an opportunity for us to contribute, the wisdom of our Kūpuna that we embody and understand today to inform this global conversation. So yeah, so you can email me, and there'll be more. We have an article that will be coming out in the Journal of Sustainability. Just got accepted yesterday, so we got to do some revisions, and we have several other projects that we're kind of working on. But I think it's a real opportunity. And yeah, I can speak more on that, but if there's other questions, I can take them.
Perfect. All right, so we got 2 other questions that came in. The first one is talking about tracking bills, and as they can be overwhelming, is there 1 or 2 that you would want us to track carefully?
Yeah.
1 or 2 bills.
So I would say if you go onto our Āina Aloha Economic Futures website, I think you can find that infographic there. And I would choose the one that, makes the most sense for your values. I don't want to kind of prescribe. But yeah, there's some important ones about, later there'll be a resolution on, asking the state to commit towards achieving a circular economy. But that reso hasn't been introduced yet, but we're about to introduce it later this month. So if you're interested in this broader circular economy discussion, that would be a key one to follow. And the ones that I shared in the infographic, there's some real specific ones that, again, depending on what community you're from, what you're interested in, an Aloha Āina workforce. I think this is a really innovative, interesting one. So advances Aloha Āina by establishing a sustainable Hawaii workforce program, committee, and a special fund. So that could be really important for our community Aloha Āina efforts and nonprofits. Retaining ancestral lands, protecting Āina Kūpuna by limiting the use of quieting titles. So, for our ohana that own kuleana, and maybe now it's 312% or whatever, and it's split amongst the families. And Sydney's very familiar with this. There's this, after the overthrow, they passed this quiet and partition initiative to be able to separate kuleana and to divide them and sell them out. And so this bill could help, families hold on to their Āina. Farm to school, that's huge. If we could get from farm to school, that helps our local farmers, our producers to have guaranteed buyers. And then it helps our keiki to have more nutrient-rich, healthy food in the cafeterias. Decriminalizing houselessness. There's a whole range of really important issues that I think we'll be following and tracking. So I hope that helps. But you're right. It's hard to follow. The bills can change rapidly, and sometimes the number, they could just rewrite the entire bill. So we are aware of that and just, going to try to follow them and advance the right ones. But the purpose is that the ledge and others know we're not going away. Aloha ʻāina is not going away. And they will have to contend, and we're going to help them make good decisions that align with our values. And yeah, I'll leave it there.
All right. Got another one. It says, what are key actions Kumu can take to push the ʻike forward and farther in the haumana of all levels and multiple disciplines? So what are some of those key actions that the Kumu can take to push the ʻike forward?
Yeah, I think first of all, Kumu are pushing it forward. I mean, I'm so inspired by the Kumu that are, harder now with COVID, but you think about the work of our haumana out on the Āina, restoring like Pai Pai, I mean, geez, I think there's keiki now that have gone through, these makaʻikaʻi kind experiences that are now taking my college courses. And in fact, I know because some of them tell me. So Kumu are key. You folks are amazing, and the work that you're doing, getting our OPO, our youth, our keiki to first of all appreciate, their identity and their relationships with who they are, and to connect with Āina, I think is really, important and critical. I think maybe one thing to really consider is like I started with that ʻŌiwi optics, thinking about agency, thinking about, how do we teach our haumana, knowing that we could see our history in so many ways, certain things we failed on, certain things we made mistakes, but also we achieved a whole bunch. Okay. And to me, highlighting the stories in which our people were successful in the midst of tremendous challenges and tribulations, highlighting the innovation, the agency, really, like, I hear it from my students. Like, they feel inspired, they feel empowered, they feel like, hey, I can do something too. And I think that resilience, the using mo'olelo of resilience, I think can really, really help them. Because to me, once you actualize that, in the individual keiki, they'll run that forward, and whether it's Minecraft or, whatever it is that they're experiencing, like, you can use that framework. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, we don't have any in the chat right now, but if things come through.
While we're waiting, and we just have a few minutes left, I just have to say it's so exciting to hear how you've taken like the concepts and the history all the way to like legislative stuff today. So we'll be following, for those that want to follow like the theoretical, epistemological to the practical, right? So for those of us that want to follow when it becomes a resolution and then eventually a bill, will it be announced widely so that we can testify? And
yeah. So again, if you sign up on our Āina Aloha efforts and initiatives, we're trying to keep everybody in the loop in terms of advocating and advancing the bills that make sense. We're also partnering. We're not doing this alone. So, we didn't introduce all of these bills. We're partnering. There's groups that have been working on these issues, for a long time that we're just trying to elevate and partner with. So, but yeah, we're doing our best. We're all volunteer effort. So, we don't have any staff. But we're certainly doing our best, and we're going to continue to kind of do that.
awesome.
Mahalo.
Yeah. You are the go-between at the legislature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are. But and it's just about trying to actualize and achieve the kinds of changes that we want to see. Prior to COVID, just educating on circular economies, I think very few people in Hawaii, if maybe you weren't in a more immediate circle, hadn't really heard about it. And so we have been able to use this period and this time. Part of it is shifting mindsets, and realizing like, actually the the antiquated system is not the system of our kupuna. It's actually it's the linear economy that the old boy network clings to in Hawaii today. And all around the world, people are shifting and realizing that system is not, it will bring our society to collapse globally. And so we really have to achieve this change. And a big part is, linking Aloha ʻāina with global best practice and trying to inform on both ways.
Super exciting. Mahalo. Anything else last minute, Mark?
Nope, we didn't have anything that comes through, but I know people may have some, and it's beamer@hawaii.edu.
Beamer@hawaii.edu. Aye.
Perfect.
Yeah. Oh, and ike makawau ki kahi mea mai kumukuan. Oh, nui ko aloha ia oi. Oh, just, yeah. He wahi haumana ha'a ke ia. Mahalo.
Mahalo. So, mahalo, Kamana. If there's nothing else, aloha kumukwan as well. And thanks, Kamana, for
Vale, ha'aheo no o kupuna maha ia oi. Aloha wau ia oi. Malama.
Malama. Mahalo. Mahalo.
mahalo. Thank you, Kamana, really. And thanks for testing my tech skills today as well. But it's all good.
Good job. Good job, Sid.
Good job, Kamana. You're awesome.
Okay.
So
Aloha.
thank you. Aloha nui.
Thank you. Aloha.